Welcome everyone to Through the Void Gate, a Warcaster podcast for new and experienced players. Deploying in 3.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Through the Void Gate. Thanks for joining us after our holiday break. I hope everyone enjoyed themselves. I'm joined today by Justin.
Howdy.
And Spencer.
Hey ya.
So we always like to start off with what's going on in the community. So Justin, why don't you let us know what's happening?
Yeah, there's actually been a couple episodes on different podcasts that have come out. So Encrypted Command released their episode 2. It's all about Pendulum. And they actually do a really big deep dive into a lot of the scenarios. You should give it a listen. Their meta kind of focuses more on full size. So they're kind of parallel to us where we play a lot of skirmish over here. They do a lot of full size because they actually can play in person a lot of the time. So they have a lot of good insight on those scenarios. Charge and Spike just released a signal intercept where they interviewed the Kickstarter, the guy that runs the Kickstarters, Andy. So give that a listen if you're interested in that. And the signups for the first Pendulum event, the first online Pendulum event, have just dropped. So the Pendulum event starts on the 10th, from what I understand. And yep. So it starts on the 10th. And I hope to play against you guys. I've already got my list ready. I'm super hyped for it. And Sneaky, what do we have for news?
So we're talking about the Pendulum event. So that's the TTS League Season 2 that I am running. And so we'll talk about the TTS League Season 1 that just wrapped up. So we've got the final results for everyone that played. It was a really awesome event. We had people playing from every single skill level, from people who played 1 to 0 games up to, myself and Jay, who played, close to 100. So I came in first with playing Empyreans with a undefeated score of 4 to 0 with a victory point difference, which means across all of my games, I scored this much more than my opponents, so 59 points. Now, we are using Chalong, so the reason I like using that is because I have 0 input over the bracket. So I do that so people can't say that I gamed the system. Now, coming in second, this is where things got weird because we had some issues with people dropping out and causing weird buy situations and some other things. So I kind of had to throw out strength of schedule, which was the, according to the Pendulum packet, the tiebreaker determiner. And so I had to go with victory points from that point forward, which then got even more complicated a little bit later on. So I kind of had to make some executive decisions about who placed where. So I went and saw victory points as well as games played and a couple of different things. So these next 3 positions, 2, 3, and 4, they're all kind of basically tied. So we've got coming in second, we have Josh over here.
Woohoo!
Yeah, at a score of 3 to 1 with a victory points difference of 17. Coming in third, we have Nathan, who's no Howard, coming in at 3 to 1. Now, both of them played Marcher Worlds, and they played them both very differently. They had very different lists as far as how Marcher Worlds went, coming in at a victory point difference of 14. Josh had like a very melee-focused Marcher Worlds list throughout the entire tournament, and Nathan had a pretty traditional shooty boy Marcher World list. Now, coming in fourth was Sergi with a victory points difference of 2. Sergi played Eternus Continuum. So we've got a pretty good representation across the factions there. Coming in fifth, we have Ryan over at Studio M. So if you haven't checked out his YouTube videos, he has all of his league games up on YouTube. So he was playing Empyreans, score of 2 to 2 with victory points difference of 7. And then this is kind of where things got a little bit complicated because some people had some weird buy situations or they weren't able to finish their games. So coming in at 6, also 2 to 2, we have Red Wolf from over at Hyper News Network playing Marcher Worlds. We have Rodco playing ISA, also at 2 to 2. We have Sorlo playing AC at 2 to 2. So the victory points difference for all of them was difficult to calculate just because they had some issues. Finally, we have Hiticule coming in at 1-3, playing ISA with a victory points difference of -15. Why am I here? Playing Marcher Worlds for 1-3 with a victory points difference of 27. And then finally, Jay, 24-hour gamer geek from over at Charge and Spike, playing Eternus Continuum, came in last with a score of 0-4 with a victory points difference of -29. Now the two ISA players, they ranked relatively low, but it's nothing about the faction. They're both just very new players. So I wouldn't make any assumptions about faction balance from all of this, because like imps are pretty strong, and I think they need some tuning. But I think I would have done really well regardless of what faction I played, just because I have a lot of experience. And then Marcher World ranked pretty high, but you got some AC sprinkled in there as well. So I was pretty happy with the overall faction balance across the tournament. And I'm really excited for the next tournament. It's going to be Pendulum Rule Set. I figured out a couple of things to hopefully help mitigate some of the issues that I had with Shalong going forward. And hopefully everybody, anybody that has Tabletop Simulator wants to get in some games, please sign up. We're new player friendly. It's a tournament, but it's not like we're not taking it super serious. We want to make sure everyone has a good time, learns the game, has that experience. So definitely come sign up, come play, or reach out on Discord, toss me a looking for group, and I'll be happy to play with you guys. Now, the other stuff that we have going on for the news is the Privateer Press related information. So I'm going to start off with the latest Warcaster Wednesday that we had dropped. I teasing some of the models coming in Kickstarter 3. So we had 3 models revealed for the original 3 factions. Of the Marcher World's Air Assault Cadre, the piloted robot vehicle, which just looks nuts. It's a giant, chunky thing that doesn't even fit on its 15mm base that it's shown on, with these huge jetpack helicopter things that I know Josh is super excited about.
Oh, yeah, I cannot. I saw that model and I was, how do I fit multiple of these in my list?
So jealous.
I personally don't like it just because it's too chunk, in my opinion, but a lot of people really like the chunk, and that's what attracted them to Marcher World, so I know some people are super excited about it. Interesting thing is that, it reveals to us the cadre that Marcher World is going to be coming in Kickstarter 3, which we'll talk about here in a second, is the Air Assault Cadre. Now, for ISA, they have teased the Thurge Commander, which I am super excited about and also very sad about at the same time, because it looks absolutely amazing, and that means that I'm going to have to be investing more money into ISA, which was not
He
planned.
does look really sick.
Yeah, which I was not planning on doing, but he looks amazing. He's got this big energy sword. He's just so chonky. He's got an immolator on his wrist. So, like,
I mean, he's part of like what people think of when they think ISA, right? He's just this dude with this big sword, which is when you look at the first starter box and you see that firebrand with that big sword, that's what you're thinking of. And then when you play a firebrand, you almost never put a sword on it. But this guy will always have his sword and he'll always look cool. So, like, I'm excited for him.
Yeah,
I mean, I get some like Darth Vader meets Boba Fett vibes off of him. He's got the giant laser sword. He has the flamethrower on the wrists. Like, that combination can't be bad.
he's got a cloak, big chunky armor. Like, he just looks amazing. And the cool thing is, so lore-wise, right, what Thurges are is they're a type of caster, basically. So you've got Thurges, who basically imbue their weapons with, magical abilities or whatever. So the current Thurges that we have in the game are Voss and Fang. So what we've seen from Thurges is that they have different attack types. So that's going to be really exciting to see. I love options. Options make me happy. The Forge is my favorite weapon in Empyreans. So I'm super excited for that. And then if that means that ISA is going to have a whole cadre of Thurges, then I'm gonna be so stoked. So basically, imagine ISA having access to, squads of gun mages like in War Machine.
I think ISA would get more of like a squad of like smaller versions of this guy, like a squad of more graves.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a squad of
Like if you're gonna get gun mages, I think Marcher World are gonna get that, right?
yeah. So I mean, the ISA seems to have sword mages.
Sword mages, I like this.
Because that's what Voss is. He's a sword mage.
Right.
And so this guy is basically a non-hero version of Voss with a gun instead of a second sword. And if ISA gets a whole squad of these guys, oh, I'm gonna be so happy.
I think there's some cool things that they haven't even shown us yet, and this guy's already got me excited just by him, just him.
He also looks like if he goes toe to toe with Voss, he is winning. Probably not the case, but if we're basing it strictly off looks,
Voss is teleporting away.
I am 100% getting a second one of these guys, and converting him into Voss, because I hate Voss's model. Hate it. Like, Angel is making me feel a little bit better about Voss because, it's Will Angel and he can paint anything to look amazing. But I greatly dislike his model. But this guy, oh man, am I going to put Voss's two, and I own Voss, and I just don't even want to put them together. Am I going to put Voss's two swords on this dude and have him go look absolutely amazing? 100%.
I actually don't mind the Voss model.
I hate it. It's well, one, I hate his head. And then I don't like his cloak. Just this guy has a cloak. But then also the way his armor is shaped, where it has the weird tabard thing on his chest, just looks weird. It doesn't look like ISA. I don't like it. There's just a lot I don't like about that model.
On a brief note on Angel, about an hour ago, he showed some painting techniques on Raxus, and oh my god, did Raxus look beautiful.
Oh, I missed that. I'm gonna have to check that out. And so then the final thing that we had revealed in our Warcaster Wednesday was the Eternus Continuum female witch attendant squad, which I don't know if this just means it's the female model or if there's going to be like a female squad and a male squad, which could be interesting. But it looks really cool.
I love the blades. The blades are sick.
The helmets look really cool too. Like, I think this model is.
They almost look like weavers without like the cloth.
And without the giant weird backpack thing and the.
Yeah, they're like weavers without the giant backpack, without the cloth, and swords instead of the weird ball.
Yeah, and the weird horns coming off the side. Like, I do not like AC female weavers at all. I don't really like the male one that much either. But these look amazing. They look so good.
They look like they're going to hit hard.
Well, they look kind of like assassins. Yeah, so it looks like they're just going to just slice and dice you. And then the question is whether they're going to have a range attack as well, because they might have, some kind of like psychic range attack, because they don't have a gun, but they do have the Weaver like thing on their head. So they might, shoot some kind of psychic bullet thing. So I'm really interested to see what these do, especially in combination with their cadre leader, which was revealed in the 2021 Looking Ahead, which the Great Witch just looks absolutely insane.
I'm so excited for that model. I want it. Even if it's not even good on the table, I want it just to paint it. That model looks so cool. I cannot wait to do my weird Skaven stuff with it. It's great.
I don't know. I feel like your Skaven stuff is just gonna ruin. I don't know, man. I feel like you're just gonna ruin the model. It's so good.
I promise. I'll make it good.
It's some kind of like crazy Shiva meets floating beetle thing. I don't even know. It looks cool.
I don't ever think there's been a concept art that has called out for Doug Hamilton to sculpt it so bad in the history of Privateer.
What's that reference to?
Hamilton is one of the people that does a lot of the sculpting for Privateer.
Yeah, and Doug Hamilton did so much of the Crick stuff when he came on, and that witch gives me like early Cricks, like some more Nabra vibes, And I've heard people joke around about like the Doug Hamilton tax because he just doesn't know how to like under sculpt a model. Like every model that man touches is absolutely beautiful. Therefore, certain Crix models ended up being slightly more expensive because of like just the sheer amount of amazingness he puts into them.
Got you. Yeah, and the crazy thing is this thing is a 50 millimeter solo. Like,
That would be the first, right?
yeah, it's the first. It's gonna be huge and it's gonna be gorgeous. And I don't even play AC, and I can't wait to see this on the field. I'm sure it's gonna rip me a new one, but I'm okay with it because it is gorgeous. The other thing that got revealed, or at least the other models, is the range combat asset for Marcher Worlds to accompany the vehicle, which is a squad of jetpack people with 2 battle rifles on their arms. And I don't even know. I'm terrified.
I'm also terrified.
I'm terrified.
We all know they'll probably have slip displacer or a better slip displacer. Ugh.
I mean, I'm just excited for more flight and just more plastic or well metal on the table. Like
Well,
my whole army is going to be chunk now.
and then the other thing is, they've got. I don't know if they're going to have rules for them, but they have 2 battle rifles. Which one of the main balancing things with Marcher Worlds is the fact that they don't have a ton of attacks, right? Compared to like ISA, or Empyreans in certain situations. But
Hover Jeep, we can have 2 strafe guns.
yeah, um,
Or the particle cannon that just gets pow force to like everything.
I'm talking about squads, right? Which is relevant on full size. Now, if these guys have something similar to like the enforcers, where if they're charged, they can use both battle rifles. Oh, it's gonna be terrifying, absolutely terrifying. But beyond the models, we got a lot of really cool information about what it is that we can look forward to here in the future. So we'll start with some of the Kickstarter 3 teasers that they released. So we know that it's coming mid-year. So we're probably going to expect that June, July. I'm going to guess July just because the Kickstarter 2 models come out slated to come out in April. Here's fingers crossed that they come out earlier. So then that gives them a little bit more time. Whereas if they come out in April, they probably hit retail in May, and then the next month they're doing a Kickstarter. I don't think that's likely. So I'm going to guess July, maybe August at the tail end of things. So that's.
I would say that June is not unlikely for the next Kickstarter.
I just can't imagine them doing a Kickstarter a month after Kickstarter 2 hits retail. Like,
Well, when did the heavy squads hit retail?
that's fair.
We had a Kickstarter pretty much like it was very close to when they released.
Yeah, but their release schedule is different. So they made it clear that the wave concept they didn't like that they tested out in Kickstarter 1. So they got away from that. So that's why the heavies came out so much later than everything else. Whereas they've said Kickstarter 2, everything's getting released at once. So I don't know. It's just it could be in June. I could be wrong, but I'm guessing July. That's my personal guess. Now, so that's exciting. So I got to start saving up because I'm definitely getting whatever Empyrean stuff comes out if it's half as awesome as this other things.
They haven't even revealed any Empyrean stuff, and I'm terrified of what Empyreans are going to get if I'm this excited about the other faction stuff.
They haven't teased Empyreans at all, and I can't wait. And if I'm going to be getting some ISA stuff too, then I got to start saving now. Oh man, my wallet is not going to be happy with me.
Kickstarter 2, when it releases to retail, is already going to break me.
Yeah. So you're planning on dropping how much?
It's a lot because I'm going to pretty much fully pledge out my my ISA and my AC. So like that's like 3 to 4 vehicles there if I decide that a second jet bike is worth it. And yeah, 2 sides is definitely worth it.
Yeah. And then, I mean, at least, so like the flip side, at least you don't really have to buy much in the way of the ISA squads. Because defenders are cool, but you don't really need them. Whereas you're gonna have to drop a bunch on the Raiders because AC needs.
I just bought 2 more ISA squads today.
But yeah,
With that Game Nerds thing going on.
yeah.
I bought 1 more of each squad, so now I have 3 of each of the base squads. Because I'm not super excited about the defenders. I'll probably get a unit of them, but like realistically, I'm probably going to be sticking with mostly enforcers and annihilators.
Yeah, that's so many. Why do you need that many squads?
That's full size, man.
All right, whatever.
I'm ready. I want to play.
Well, listen, when you realize that you have too many squads, you can totally send some to me. I need some more ISA squads. I just got
that realization. But I think 6 is probably okay for ISA. Like for AC, I'm going to have too many.
Yeah.
Because right now I already have 5, and I'm going to need to buy 2 Vassal Raiders, right?
Yeah, at least 2.
So I'm going to have 7, which is definitely too many.
Definitely. Yeah, and so then some other things. So some teasers for what's coming in the 3rd Kickstarter. So we've got some updates for all 4 of the factions, but we haven't had any appear in teams. So the big thing is they're going to be introducing new cadres into the game. So each cadre consists of an assortment of elite models, as well as a special centerpiece to expand the armies of Warcaster with new powers and abilities. So it's pretty safe to say that AC's centerpiece is the Great Witch. Now, whether the Marcher World centerpiece is supposed to be that vehicle or not is yet to be determined. But this is pretty cool because this is kind of what I've been saying for a while, that they're going to basically be coming out with like little mini themes. And this seems to allude to that. These cadres are going to be like little mini themes. So instead of being paladins or vassals or whatever, they're going to have something different. So it seems like the AC theme is witches. The Martial World theme is going to be these ranged combat. And the ISA theme is looking like it's going to be Thurges, which I'm super excited about. No clue what Empyreans are going to be. Now, on top of that, the next block of Warcaster, so Kickstarter 3, is going to feature a detailed setting book with in-depth exploration of the factions and worlds of the Hyperanian, which I'm super excited about. I know a lot of people are super excited about because people have been craving lore for this game. Absolutely craving it.
Desperately. The number of times I see people asking where they can get a hold of the lore on the Facebook group, it's all the time. And that we're finally going to have a lore book it's just super exciting. I'm excited for it. I'm not even super a lore person, but I am excited for a lore book.
Yeah, I'm not a big lore person either. Like I used to enjoy reading like the Warhammer Fantasy and 40K codexes and stuff, but I never got super into it. But the best part is that we don't even have to wait until Kickstarter 3 to start getting some of our lore fixes, because kicking off early in January, they're going to be releasing a series of quote-unquote extensive articles delving into the philosophy and ethos of each faction, along with a detailed strategy and tactics review that will reveal the shrouded histories of the Warcaster factions, as well as the secrets to winning with them on the tabletop. So I'm super excited about that, because we're going to be getting not only lore, but also some strategic analysis, which I really appreciate coming from the developers, just to see basically where their heads are at, and I think that that's super valuable, is to have insight into what the developers think are good and where they think that the game should be taken, and how that relates to what we see on the tabletop, and whether those are the same thing or not, right? So I'm super excited for that. On the lore and gameplay side of thing, here's the thing I'm super, super excited about, is we're also going to be getting a campaign system for waging a galaxy-spanning war. So basically there's going to be a Warcaster campaign module, which I can't wait for. They say that the expansion sets for each faction will introduce unique campaign-specific models, which I don't really know what that means. but it sounds cool. Cipher expansions, and then also other accessories to enhance your episodic narrative experience. So basically, more terrain. So I'm super excited because I think that this game can take really well to a campaign setting, and it just sounds like a lot of fun. Like, I want to see Baphomet, who's my Sentinel, just getting stronger and stronger every single match as he just rips people apart across the table.
There's going to be a special rule that Sentinels can't get any stronger.
We will make it so.
Those and Strike Raptors, they're limited from advancement.
So I want to see like a map of planets, like kind of the map of the galaxy, and you can jump like planet to planet, conquering the planet in this campaign, kind of like a game of Risk where you play miniature
play Dawn of War
skirmish games.
2? No, Dawn of War. Was it 2's campaign system? Did you play that?
No, I didn't.
Oh, they had one. They had a system just like that, and you would get certain buffs from owning certain planet clusters and stuff.
Oh, yeah, that would be so sweet. I didn't even think of that part. I just thought like a kind of like a real-time strategy aspect to it is like you conquer the planets, like lends itself to really fun league play over a little while.
Yeah, I know someone was working on homebrewing something like that for Brawl Machine. So, yeah, I mean, there's definitely a desire for something like that.
I always think that linked games is always a really cool idea. But you always have to have X number of people on the same page. Like we all have the same number of linked games, and make sure that the people that didn't win stay relevant to the people that did. So I'm kind of curious to see how they do it, but I am super excited for it.
Yeah. I know earlier you were talking about wanting it to be like Mordheim, right?
Yeah. Like this would be a little bit different than Mordheim, but Mordheim was one of my all-time favorite games. Like, it was just a game that you could just jump in, have some silly fun. Like, the diving charges was one of my favorite things. Like, you'd get bonuses for jumping off of buildings at people. And it was super fun. It was super cool. Linked systems, so then, like, when your characters died, you had to roll on I think it was a D66 table, and find out if they got sold to the fighting pits, lost an arm, just had a miraculous recovery, and were actually somehow stronger after all of it. It was super cool.
I've never heard of a D66 before in my life. So.
Well, what happens is you roll 2 D6s, and one is 10s and one is 1s.
Got you.
So that's like the D66.
Okay. That's pretty cool. So yeah, that is super, super exciting. So we have tons of really cool and exciting things coming for us this year for Warcaster. So I just can't wait to see all of this fleshed out over time. And with these teases they've given us so far, I'm just looking forward to teases for the next 6 months. Because, please.
Yes, please. Okay, so with that... Oh, we didn't mention actually the sweet piece of artwork we got for AC. So we got a look at an AC, basically Witch's Temple, with the new witch. What'd you call it? The gigantic one?
The Great Witch is the name given to us so far.
Yes, the Great Witch in the centerpiece with the new witch unit around her kind of offering stuff up to her.
Yeah, attending to her, because, they're attendants.
There are some boats floating down like a little moat with red spheres in them, which kind of give me like a soul vibe.
Well, they're just like these weird, like, futuristic lotus things, lotus blossoms.
Yeah, they're lotus blossoms, 100%.
And then the most exciting part is in the foreground there is 2 giant chunky guys with glaives standing guard. They kind of look like AC's version of bastions. And if the model turns out anything like the art, I am super excited.
Yeah.
I'm mega excited because I have reason to buy them.
They look so cool. And then, like, from a gameplay perspective, my prediction is that they're just going to be like big chunky boys with Guardian, because it looks like they're Guardian the Great Witch, and so I think that's going to be like their role is to just
Basically first access to shield guard type mechanic.
hmm Yeah, like Corvus has Guardian, so whether it's going to be Guardian or Defender, which Defender is the one where you spike, and Guardian's the one where you don't have to spike. So we'll see what they get, but I'm assuming they're going to get some kind of defensive shield guardy type ability.
It's AC. We're gonna get the one where you hit the spike.
That's fair.
But yeah, we had to touch on that before we move on to the main
We
subject.
almost offended Josh by not talking about that. I'm very sorry, Josh.
I mean, they're not even my faction. They're just so damn beautiful. I couldn't let us move on without them.
Yeah, I gotta say, AC got some really cool looking stuff coming forward.
I'm super excited for all of them.
Yeah, the March Roll stuff isn't my style, but I can't wait to see the rest of the ISA stuff, because if the third commander is anything to go off of, that's I don't even know.
Calm yourself.
I love the look of ISA. I love the clean power armor, and then the third commanders looks amazing. And if the rest of them look anything like that, I'm just gonna be so excited.
Okay, so this is our 9th episode, and we have received overwhelming support from the community, and we just want to say thank you to each and every one of you for all your support. It's amazing. It gives us a little shot in the arm to keep us going and doing what we've been doing. Just thank you from everyone here on the cast. We appreciate all of you guys.
Thank you.
To kind of give back to the community, we decided to do an Ask Us Anything episode. And we've got about 12 questions on the docket. And thankfully, I mean, we left it pretty open with the Ask Us Anything, and people were pretty calm. So we appreciate that.
I was personally very disappointed. I wanted people to ask, about, pineapple on pizza, which the answer is yes.
Yes.
And,
always pineapple on pizza.
On that.
which, I was hoping for some crazy stuff. So next time we do this, when I say ask us anything, I mean literally ask us anything, because it's fun.
I agree. No, we're very down. We're here for the community. So if you guys want to get to know us, favorite foods, dislikes, whatever, just hit us up.
Hit us with all those dating app questions.
Oh boy. Easy. I do like long walks on the beach though. Okay, so let's jump into the questions. We're going to jump right into a pretty broad topic here. When I was playing Hidicule in the league, he asked me to post this up for us. He would like some tips for building a proper map and wants to know where you guys get your inspiration for map building.
He probably built the most maps, so we'll start with him.
Yeah, so I'll jump off. So tips for building maps. So whenever I'm looking at making a map, the first thing I do is look at the scenario and where the objectives are and what someone needs to accomplish, throughout the game. And you got to look at things like how close the objectives are to each other, what kind of line of sight lanes make sense between them, as well as things like, for example, in chaos theory or spontaneous combustion, they're really, really close to each other. So one squad might be able to contest or score two different objectives. So I got to think about how can I position the terrain in such a way in order to prevent that, right? Because I don't want one unit being able to interact with multiple objectives, right? Especially with things like displacement index or the fulcrum, and other out of activation movement being a big thing. So that's
getting harder when the Raker comes out.
yeah, and infiltrators. So that's one of the main things that I look at the first thing I look at when I'm looking to build a map. And then from there, I just kind of look at what terrain that I have or have available to me and think about what would be cool, So I get an idea of okay, I need to have a big line of sight blocking piece of terrain in the middle of this map, or else there's going to be way too many shooting lanes, or I need one on this objective or these two objectives in order to prevent squads from affecting multiple objectives. So then I go, okay, cool. So what do I have available to me? And then what's going to look good with that? And then I just kind of go from there. I prefer more terrain to less, just because Warcaster can be so lethal that if there's not a lot of cover and line of sight blocking terrain, it can just be, as Red likes to say, planet bowling ball, and that can really, really affect other factions differently. So one of the other things I look into is like something I used to try to balance around, which was basically became impossible to balance around, was things like Strike Raptors and Scout Dust Wolves, and like where they can get, at the beginning of the game on
times we spent moving a Scout Dusk Wolf around and seeing if we could get deployment zones in skirmish safe from a Scout Dusk Wolf. I'll cherish those memories forever.
The answer is no, you can't. So
it's so hard, especially when Ascension Catalyst is a card. Slip Displacer is an ability they have. There's just so many factors.
Well, with Cortical Rampager, it's literally impossible. So
yeah, Rampager kind of broke it all the way open.
Yeah, so I don't even try. So just taking some things like that into account, like how one of the things that people have noticed that I've started doing on my maps is placing rough terrain at the bottom of ladders, which has gotten fairly good reviews so far. Different.
Bad review.
Yeah, Justin doesn't like it because AC can be slow and has some issues.
Well, it's just that first of all, I think it's just that I hate rough terrain in the game. Period. Like I personally hate the just flat -2. That's me though. I understand a lot of people really like it. I just don't like how it interacts with a lot of different things.
Yeah, it's less about the rough terrain and how it interacts with slams, and I think that slams should just.
Well, I think there's also the slams, but also if I'm a squad and I'm 4 inches away from it, and I want to get to an objective that's 1 inch into it, I can't get there. Because I'm 4 inches away, I can't touch that terrain because I lose 2 inches. It's weird. Well, I mean, maybe a solo would be more accurate for that particular example, but what I'm saying is it makes for some very strange situations.
That's fair. But that's
personally, I feel like the half movement thing, whereas it gets a little bit more nitty gritty when you're moving out of a piece of terrain. It's pretty manageable in this game because the most movement most things have. I think the highest movement in the game is a Scout Dusk Wolf or a Dusk Wolf with 3 arc on it. So the highest movement is 8. Like you're not having these crazy movements. So I honestly didn't see the half movement thing being a huge deal, but it is what it is. Yeah. And rough terrain frustrates me the way it works. So that's what.
I like it because it's easy to plan around, right? So you're saying like, if you're within 4 inches in the rough terrain, you got to get another inch in. It's like, okay, cool. So I know that if I place my model there, then I can either get to where I need to get to or I can't just by taking one measure. I don't have to sit there and measure to the rough terrain and then measure how far into the rough terrain I am and all this kind of stuff. I know if I'm within 6 inches of where it is, I can move 4 inches and I can either get there or not get there. Right.
My thing is if I have a 6-inch movement and I'm 4 inches away, that rough terrain may as well be a building.
Yeah.
Which is like just so like my personal mind just like the sparks start flying out of my head. It's like, come on.
Yeah, I mean, I get you. It's a little weird, but it's simple and it's easy, and it makes planning a lot easier, which I appreciate. So there's that. But so back onto my topic of like when and where and how I position rough terrain is I look at the movement lanes. So once I've placed all of my obstacles and obstructions down, I place my rough terrain after that typically. So I look at what lanes people are going to be using to move, and I especially look at ladders and where people can abuse ladder shenanigans. And so when I think that ladder shenanigans can be a problem, I'll put rough terrain at the bottom of the ladder. And if it's not going to be an issue, in my opinion, then I won't put rough terrain there. because you don't want rough terrain at the bottom of every single ladder. That's just it creates a terrible experience. You might as well say ladders cost 4 inches of movement to move up and down, and just leave it at that, right? So I'll place rough terrain at the bottom of ladders when I think it's going to allow something to get between objectives way too fast, right? And there's ways of getting around that. You know, obviously Pathfinder and Flight, you know, I can't do anything about that, but those are model choices that you've made, and so I think that should be rewarding in some way or another, right? That you have these models with these rules, because you can actually use your rules. Sorry, AC.
Hey, the squad spike should give Pathfinder. I can move through a building, I can move through a wall, but this rubble on the ground is just too much. I can't handle this.
I mean, it depends on like the rough terrain you're talking about, right? So like, let's talk about it from a lore perspective. Sure, if the rough terrain is rubble, then just being able to run through it means it wouldn't bother you. But if the rough terrain is like, you know, quicksand or weird gravity distortions or ice or, you know, other things that require you to step more carefully in order to move around, then it would still impact you, right? So I think it's a balancing thing, just because giving it Pathfinder and the ability to move through anything just means like you can literally move anywhere and nobody can do anything about it.
It might actually mean I might use it for the movement aspects of it every once in a while.
It's just that particular ability just becomes less relevant with how squads actually move. So it just isn't relevant a lot, and also is super terrain dependent, you know, with your tables. But, you know, with mantlets and people being able to create choke points and stuff more easily with them now and whatnot, it might become more relevant in the future. But yeah. Anyways, we're way off topic.
My experience from making tables at home is every time I put rough terrain on the board, nobody touches it. Like, nobody touches it. Me and my brother-in-law have started playing a whole lot at home. Like, nobody goes in there. It just makes this whole area where I would have much rather had like a building with a ladder, because then somebody could have at least gone up there and gotten covered, right? Whereas I've had this rough terrain that maybe at best somebody's standing behind if I made it a forest as well. Like, I don't know. Rough terrain is just so awkward for me.
But that's the point of rough terrain. It's meant to be a negative, right? So the point of rough terrain is so that you can funnel people and have them make choices of, do I go through this rough terrain and lose movement, or do I go around it and potentially take either a longer route or not be able to like cut across and take shortcuts in between different objectives. So that's it. If your rough terrain is doing that, then it's doing its job, right? And so it's about placing the rough terrain in positions to where you can funnel models where you want them to go. So that's why I said after I place everything else down, I look at the movement lanes and where people are going to go throughout the match and how they can get in between different objectives. And that's when I place my rough terrain, so that I can slow that down if I think that it's too easy to get between different objectives. Or if I just want to incentivize people to go in certain directions in order to create different fire lanes, or have to choose between cover and movement, which is another thing that you can do with it. You know, put rough terrain in a way where if they go through the rough terrain, then they can get, you know, they have more access to cover, whereas if they don't go through the rough terrain, then they're going to be out in the open. So it creates choices throughout the game. So that's my thought process when I'm positioning things like rough terrain, as well as, you know, just obstacles and buildings in general. And as far as like where I get my inspiration, usually it's, you know, with TTS at least, I have a huge access and library to tons of different terrain and terrain options. So I'll just, you know, but search in the workshop like Infinity maps or Warhammer maps, or, you know, different maps, and then look through there, see what looks cool, and see what pieces of terrain that I like. And then if I find something that I think looks really cool, then I'll design an entire map based off of that. Like my Dawn Raid maps for the TTS League was literally designed around those the walls with the barriers in them. I saw that, I thought it looked really cool. I incorporate this into a map. So that was the first piece of terrain I put down, and then I built the rest of the map around it.
All right. So question number 2 comes from Joseph Hood, and he says, how often do you find yourself clearing all of your activation tokens, and under what circumstances? How many models are you removing activation tokens from? What stages of the game is this occurring? He also says, love you guys. Thank you, Joseph. We appreciate it. I'm going to start with this one. I find myself clearing activation tokens early in the game, like almost always turn 2, because I start with a heavy and a solo. So turn 2, I always get to clear my activation tokens. After that, I find I'm only clearing activation tokens off at the end of the pulse round.
Agreed.
But
Well, unless you're Empyreans, then you don't ever have to even put activation tokens.
That's fair. Yeah, it's so basically if you're removing your activation tokens, then your opponent messed up, right?
And that's one of the things you can learn a lot with AC is using entrophiers and those spikes to add activation tokens well. Because sometimes the most critical target that you want to put an activation token on might be the only thing that doesn't have an activation token. So watch out for that.
Yeah. Or like the other day when we were playing, like my options were kill this nemesis that was fully charged, or allow you to remove your activation tokens on your Weaver and your Scythe, which it wasn't a great choice, but I chose to kill the nemesis. So
And
I mean,
kill it.
yeah, sometimes it happens, and sometimes you're just forced to have those bad decisions. But I mean, across the 100 games I've played, it happens very, very rarely after the second turn. Now, the flip side of this question of how often do you get limited to a single activation is far more often, because your opponent can easily target out your models without activation tokens and kill them, leaving you with only one. And if you don't have a way to remove an activation token from something else, then you're stuck only using one unit, right?
Or just kill their solos, and then they will only ever get to activate one thing.
Right. Which is the easiest and most obvious way of doing that. But yes.
I also think the natural removing activation tokens thing is probably more feasible in full size. I think that because in skirmish, in order for everything to have an activation token at the end of 2 turns, is probably pretty rare. Because
Yeah.
at the end of that 3rd turn, they all just go away anyway, right?
Right.
Whereas with 5 turns, if your opponent kills the wrong things and maybe leaves you with enough stuff to be okay with it, but only activate your things that don't have activation tokens, you probably just don't even summon anything that turn, right? Or say they kill your gate and you still have all the activation tokens out, well then you can just redo it. So I think I don't play it in full size, but I think it's more relevant that happens in full size. And also, just when you're talking about clearing activation tokens, you have to mention that there are cards for everything to remove their activation token. I mean, and everybody's playing those cards, right? Like you can manipulate this kind of stuff really easily. So
on that note, I will say in my game against Hidicule for the finals of the league, he did opt not to summon 2 separate times, so he could fully clear his activation tokens off against me. And
Right,
that
yes.
was a full Battle Force game.
A savvy player can manipulate that a lot easier in full size.
I was really impressed with his reads on that and how he chose to summon and not summon to do that kind of thing. It was actually really genius on his part, so that was super cool.
Yeah, and you can manipulate it further. Like if you choose not to summon, you can also recall, and you can also run recall initiative in your Cypher deck to really give you a lot more control over what you have out on the field, what's available to you, and what can activate, not activate. I mean, if I only have 2 things on the field that have activation tokens and I play recall initiative and choose not to summon and recall the other thing, then boom, everything I have is getting activated the next turn. Right.
But only having 2 things on the board also sounds like a bad call.
Well, no, I mean, you only have 2 things that don't have activation tokens, and then you remove both of those off the board.
Oh, okay. Yeah, if you had tons of other stuff, then you're fine.
Yeah.
And you're also especially fine if you have like a Gatecrasher Morningstar that can probably bring those 2 things right back.
Right. Yeah. So I'd say on full size, it probably happens a little bit more often, but a careful planning or your opponent just murdering your everything, um, which at that point you're probably in a bad situation anyways. So
I've been in that situation way too often recently.
Agreed. Okay. So question number 3 comes from JMR on Discord. And they want to know, what is the most difficult learning curve for this game compared to other games? How do you suggest new players get over that hump? So for me, the most difficult learning curve was trying to figure out when to go for scenario and when to pressure your opponent by removing models off the table. And to be honest, I'm still feeling out that balance. The best way to get over that hump is to just play a lot of games and see what works best for your style. What would you guys say the most difficult learning curve is?
I would second that you're learning how to manage the scenario is because sometimes you're having to think turns and pulse rounds ahead on some things. So I would agree with that. I also think that trying to understand how to cycle your cipher deck is also something that's very hard for people to understand. Like sometimes it feels really bad not playing a card optimally or discarding an important card, but sometimes you need to so that you can give your opponent some misinformation. So like maybe it's the end of your cipher deck and you're going to be drawing up. So now they're planning on their turn, but you don't have Impulse Inducer, and maybe you do actually. Or if you're running Raxus, they're not thinking, hey, he's going to pull that back up. So there's a couple turns where I don't have to worry about this thing, and they kind of ease up in certain places. Manipulating your cipher deck and most importantly, just getting through your cipher deck. Play those cards even if they're not optimal sometimes, just to get through it. Playing ciphers and getting to better ciphers is better than sitting on a hand of ciphers where you're like, well, I'm going to sit on these 5 and not play anything for like 2 turns because these could be good.
yeah, my rule of thumb when it comes to discarding or playing just to play a cipher is if I'm not going to use the cipher in the next 2 turns, dump it.
Right. I think that's probably a fair rule of thumb. I think that a lot of people they get really caught up on, well, this impulse inducer is going to be really good. And then that jack dies. And it's like, well, I didn't want to get rid of that impulse inducer, and now it doesn't matter that you have it. So
Right.
while it's still a really good card, sometimes, just dump it because having it isn't doing you any good. If cards in your hand they're good because you have access to them on your next turn, but they aren't doing anything for you right now. Play your cards, discard your cards, get to cards that you want to use right now.
Right. I am super guilty of holding certain cards because I don't want to pitch them because I'm worried about when I'm going to see them again, and it's definitely affected me adversely in multiple situations.
Well, I see a lot of people, a lot of the times, like I was just talking, I played with my brother-in-law. He'll sit on those, he'll play 1 card a turn for the whole first pulse round. And I'm like, come on, man, you got to get through those cards because the cards are one of the most powerful things in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Like having that outside control over things is so powerful, and not making full advantage of that, you are really just kicking yourself. He's like, well, why did I'll be throwing away like different things that are really good cards. Like I love Furies, and I've thrown away Furies. I'm like, well, I don't have a Weaver on the board right now at the end of my turn, so I'm not going to have it next turn. So there's no point in holding on to this.
Yeah, and another thing is also paying attention to what's in your deck, right? So if you know you're running 4 Furies and you've got 1 in your hand, you've played 1 already, that's 2, and you've got 3 cards left in your deck, you know you've got 2 Furies left in your deck. So toss that Fury because you're going to draw 2 more, right?
Right.
So, yeah, and that comes with practice, just knowing what's in your deck and what you've played, what you have available to you. Yeah, and so on my side of things, I'm coming from an interesting perspective because I've never played a tabletop war game before Warcaster. So to me, everything was new. So the thing that was the largest learning curve for me was being to play scenario. I know when Dino and I first started playing against each other, he was just wrecking me at the beginning because I just wasn't making good scenario decisions. But then once I figured that out, then I got a lot better.
We would critically talk about it afterwards too. And 90% of the games it would come down to like, well, you didn't go for this scenario piece when you obviously could have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then from my experience teaching new players, as well as a little bit of my personal experience as well. One is just arc management. It takes a while to get used to because it's so important throughout every single aspect of the game. So it takes a while to figure out where your arc needs to be and when it needs to be there. So, but that's going to be regardless. Like everybody coming from any game is going to have to get used to that because it's so different. But one of the things I've noticed a lot with playing against new players coming from other games is being too scared to position your models where they can die. Things are going to die in Warcaster. They're going to die a lot.
Yes.
But you bring them back, right? So you cannot position your models in a way just to protect them while them not being relevant to scenario. Because if your models aren't relevant to scenario, they might as well not be on the board. So
I completely agree.
Yeah, I think like just coming from games where once your model dies, it dies, people initially play their models way too safe, and it costs them games. And you can't do that in Warcaster.
Our next question comes from John Zablan. I hope I said your last name right. If not, I apologize. What are strategies/tactics in deploying gates? I've tried multiplayer with buddies for Firestorm Armada, Infinity, and Bushido. Do you see multiplayer viability with Warcaster? And what do you think is the best way to promote this game in your local community given the COVID situation now?
Let's take those one at a time.
Yeah.
So, gate deploying strategies. For me, personally, I always try and measure from my gates and see where my models are going to be able to get to off of those gates. Because, especially I play AC, with Marauders, I know very early on I kept just placing gates in safe places. And then I would summon a Marauder off of that gate, and I wouldn't be able to get to the scenario point that I had wanted to because I didn't measure it. So when that Marauder can't make it to that scenario point, it makes me not even want to activate that Marauder. And I kind of wish the opponent will kill it. I kind of hope it becomes a distraction Carnifex. So
Right.
It's one of those things where you need to position your gates in ways to where they're either going to advance you to another part of the board or to where they're going to advance you to scenario. Because in full size, there are going to be gates that you have when you're trying that stretch in the middle where you're just trying to get something to be able to put out gates elsewhere.
Right.
That one's going to happen. So your gates either need to be getting you to scenario or getting you across the board so you can get on scenario. Or they need to be blocking somebody off of your scenario. I know that Sneaky did it to me one time. He saw me measuring something. I was like, haha, I'm exactly 8 inches away from this, and I have Ascension Catalyst in my hand. He's like, well, before I end my turn, I'm going to put my gate right on the edge of this scenario point. Now you can't reach it.
Yeah.
It's...
Be careful with pre-measuring people.
Yeah. So, just be aware that gates, whereas people can move through them, they can't end on top of them. So if you're worried about him getting that 8-inch move, and it's like the last turn of the pulse round, and the only way he can get on that thing is with Ascension Catalyst and 8 inches to that point, and you put that gate right on the edge there, well, you've probably secured that point. He could kill you off of it, but he's not scoring it.
Right.
So it's a big deal. So make sure you know when you can block people with your gates. It's not always relevant. It's not even usually relevant, but when it is, it's game changing.
Yeah, it can be huge. And that's sort of just one of those little tactics to have in your back pocket, right? But as far as just general placement strategies, I think Justin hit the nail on the head, is your gate has to be scenario relevant. And whether that's scenario relevant for this next turn or for 2 turns down the road, right? But you always have to be placing your gates with the idea of when these models come out of the gate, where are they going to go and what am I going to do with them? And that just has to be has to be your thought process. Now, there's also other strategies, right? Like, I've done this before, and where you just drop a gate in order to get a distraction, and you're like, hey, I put this out here in the hopes that they kill the gate, right? And ignore my other stuff because I have plans for my other stuff, but I don't care what comes out of this gate. So there's tons and tons of different strategies that you can have when it comes to gate placement, but the rule of thumb is make sure it is scenario relevant.
Yeah, I think you guys hit the nail on the head, because when I got back into the game, I was guilty of overloading one side of the board, just trying to reinforce one point, and it took me so far out of scenario. So make sure you're spreading your stuff out too. Do not cluster. Do not keep summoning in the same area just because it's safe.
Yeah, I think a good
I
example.
think it's fine to castle like that when you see that if you just hold what you've got, or at least don't let them score what you've got, you're fine. You've got the game locked up then. Usually this is like, third pulse round in skirmish. You can be like, hey, listen, I'm not on that point. You can score that point. That's fine. I'm going to keep my gates over here. I'm going to keep summoning over here because it only makes it harder for you to be relevant over here.
Right. Yeah, and that depends on the game state and the board and a couple of different things. I think a good example of this is so for gate deployment, I know we did our cast where we were watching Josh and Jay play, and that has a lot of really good insight into gate deployment. And then also on the flip side of things, where you're talking about over deploying in a certain area, is Studio M's game, his third game of the league, which should be up on his YouTube channel. He basically really overcommitted for 2 points, but then left a nemesis and a solo available on another point. And in that particular scenario, the nemesis was able to just run back and forth and just kept resetting activation tokens, or resetting because he just refused to summon things, and Ryan wasn't in a position to be able to get to that point to do anything about it, and just kept scoring 3 points every other turn because there wasn't anything to stop him from doing so. And Ryan didn't have any way of getting models onto that side of the board. So that's another good example of like overcommitting. So yeah, it really depends.
Okay, so part 2 of the question is, I've tried multiplayer with my buddies for Firestorm Armada, Infinity, and Bushido. Do you see multiplayer viability with Warcaster?
I've come up with ideas for this in the past, and the best thing that I have settled on as far as making a multiplayer Warcaster game is if you and a buddy play against another 2 people and you're both running skirmish lists, but y'all are playing a full-size game. It's going to change things up a little bit with, there's going to be more activations per pulse round and, more models on the board because you're both getting to deploy and things like that. But I think it'll work, and I think it'll be a lot of fun. So that's the best thing I've come up with as far as making Warcaster multiplayer. I don't know if either of y'all have any other ideas for that.
Well, I put a little thought into this because I have a pretty casual play group where I live, and a lot of times there's like an odd person out, so you feel bad just playing a one-on-one. And what we came up with to solve that is it kind of bastardizes Warcaster in a way because it leans away from the scenario aspect. But you play 3 pulse rounds and you go off of models killed kind of deal. Like you tally how many points worth of models you've taken off the board. And
That's interesting. That sounds a lot like there's a models agnostic skirmish game called Star Breach, and a lot of their, the way you score and things in that depends on what you killed. And they actually have 3 and 4 player scenarios on that game.
The only other thing that we thought about trying, but we're not sure about the viability of, is like a zone control kind of idea versus just being like one small point for scenario scoring. Each person, like you divide the board into like 12 sectors or something, and each person gets points for being like the controlling member of that section of the board.
Yeah, something else that might be cool would be like a bastardized version of spontaneous combustion, where say it's a 3-player scenario, and you'd have to do some weird things with the deployment zones, but you have it like set up like a triangle, and then one thing in the middle, similar to Arc of Shadows, where the point closest to you is only worth 1 point, the point in the middle is worth 2 for everybody, and then any enemy objective is worth 3 points. So that way you have like your home base, but then also, multiple enemy objectives that you can go for, as well as you can all fight over the middle. I think that might be interesting as well. The big thing is just, I guess you could do the same turn things. It's just like the problem with stuff like that is how you avoid, someone getting ganged up on.
Right.
So that's the biggest issue with things like 3-player scenarios or any kind of multiplayer free for all, is how do you avoid someone getting ganged up on, which I don't know.
And that's an interesting concept too. Like the best I've figured to mitigate that, which isn't even a good answer, is that only one of your activations can target each player, and they can't be the same player. I mean, that doesn't help when when both people send their heavy at the one player. But that's as close as I could figure to mitigating that whole ganging up on people mechanic.
Yeah.
It's not a good answer, but it's an answer. Actually, what I think would be really cool is if they explored like different ways to play the game. So my thinking is, you kind of turn it into an arena style setup instead of just a city street, and you have one portable objective in the middle, and it kind of becomes a capture the flag style game. And you can have 3 to 4 players that are all going for this one objective. And so you're ganging up on the one person, right? But it's because they're the one carrying the portable objective. So, each person would have a score zone in their deployment zone, and their goal would be to get it back. I think you would have to, I think Marcher World probably just wins that game unless you add some kind of limiter. Like, once you have the portable objective, you can't move any more than 6 inches in an activation.
Yeah, or something like that.
In a turn, even. You would have to say a turn. Like, because encrypted command and things that let you activate the things again, I think are fine, because people have a chance to respond to them. But having something like a Nemesis go up and he's an inch away from the portable, he kills the guy, and then, no, it wouldn't work like that. Something else kills the guy, and then he just jet boosters 18 inches and scores. Not. It goes against what the game is trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
So you would need some kind of limiter on how much movement you get once you have the objective.
Yeah, or like a fully charged Dust Wolf kills the guy, walks 8 inches, slips his places for another 3, and then cortical rampages for another 5.
So you would have to put a limiter like, hey, this model, if it's going to interact with the objective, it cannot move any more than 6 inches.
Yeah, which games like Marvel Crisis Protocol have scenarios like that. And I don't know anything about, the Firestorm Armada or Infinity or Bushido, but, they might have things that we could look to for examples. But at the same time, Privateer Press has already demonstrated with their race mode that they're open, and the new campaign mode coming out, that they're open to, drastically different ways to play Warcaster. So hopefully they come out with some kind of, multiplayer thing in the future.
Race mode probably could be 3 to 4 players, right?
Oh yeah, you can totally do race mode with multiple players. Absolutely.
So, I think that they are trying to think outside the box of this game. And think about their last few games they've played. Do they have a multiplayer version of Monpok? Do you know, Josh?
No, I've actually never touched Monpok, so that's the only Privateer Press game I haven't waded into yet.
I haven't touched it either, but I could have sworn somebody was talking about a multiple person version of that game. I may just be making that up. But if you look at their Riot Quest, Riot Quest is meant to be played 2 people, 3 people, 4 people. You could, if there was enough room for models to be placed, you could probably do up to however many people could have models placed, Like, Privateer Press is looking into these things. So I foresee us having some kind of rules for multiplayer at some point. I think they would have to tweak how a lot of the system worked, or at least a little bit of how the system worked. Because already, which is a 2-player game with it very, very pretty streamlined. the game takes a while, and adding that third person is just going to add that much more time.
Yeah.
So I think it's an interesting concept. I think, like I say, the capture the flag mode, 3-person race mode, or a teams doubles mode might be cool. But I think it's going to have to be something that they play around with, and it's going to be just casual rules probably, sort of like the Colossal Wrestling, they came out with for War Machine. Probably something that, sure, these rules are out there and they're fun and they're cool, but they're just out there for fun. They're not anything that they're going to invest like a significant amount of time for.
Okay. We got to put a pin into Colossal Wrestling, and after the cast, I need you to explain to me what that is.
You didn't see their streams with Extreme Colossal Wrestling?
Probably before my time. We will talk about this after. I am very interested.
I just want to say that Oz's Rhett Colossal is like one of my favorite things I've ever seen. It was like a Colossal that was literally pimped out. Like he has like little dollar bills and like he's like completely like shiny, super crazy gold all over. I love that model. I think that like the model is nothing like super extravagant, but it's perfect for what he's supposed to be. And they all have like their own like wrestler names for them.
That's
you
awesome.
Gotta look at Extreme Colossal Wrestling. It looks like tons of fun. I really wish I could have found somebody to play it with at some point. It looks like it's stupid fun. It's a blast.
Looks like I'm falling down the YouTube rabbit hole later. Okay, so moving on. His last question is, what do you think the best way to promote this game in your local community given the COVID situation now? I have a couple theories on this. I think first and foremost is if your community has interest in it, get them Tabletop Simulator or get them to pick up Tabletop Simulator. It goes on sale often for $11, and just show them how the game works on there. Then it'll spark their interest, and then they can pick up models on their own. If they're already interested in the game, but you guys can't play right now, I suggest doing like a Zoom meeting or Google Meet kind of deal where you guys just kind of get together and you do like a hobby hangout. And you paint your armies and you talk shop about the game and stuff like that, just to kind of build the hype up for when you guys can get together safely in person and play.
Yeah, Red did that on Discord the other day, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I personally think that like if you're able to go out and play, be out there, be visible, and play. Do it safely, but if you can, do it. Other than that, like if it's people that you would invite to your house or you would go to their house and they have a place to play, try playing, just home games. I know that I've been getting some home games recently, and it's been a blast. I've been teaching my brother-in-law how to play. It's been very different having the tactile feel of the game. It's so much different than Tabletop Simulator, and in good ways, right? Like you have to look at the board a little bit differently. You can do things in real life that sound awful in Tabletop Simulator, like having like terrain that you're going underneath. It's probably not happening in Tabletop Simulator. So having that. What?
Said I wish we could make that work in Tabletop Simulator because I love catwalks. But
right. I have like I'll have to post pictures of my boards every so often, but like I have catwalks all over the place. The one time I literally had a building that was just like two like 6x4 buildings smashed together on stilts, and I put an objective underneath both of them, like right smack dab in the middle. So anybody having to interact with that had like the most miserable time, but it looked great. It was it was true. Like I've also unfortunately modded like so many of my models, and like they're not fitting under there.
Oh, your Nemesis is fitting under anything.
My Nemesis isn't fitting in a bag. I have to carry that thing separate everywhere. Get the games out there. If you can get them on Tabletop Simulator, do it. I know it's hard. There are a lot of people that just don't. I'm shocked at how many people either A, don't own a home computer, or B, don't have home internet. I trying to get people into the things like this, I've been just floored by how many people I keep finding that just don't have either one or both of those things. But, just do what you can to try and get people engaged. Just talking to them about the game or showing them your painted models or showing them the Discord. I think anybody that enjoys Discord. I'm kind of like I personally don't normally like Discord, but I keep getting on there.
Yeah.
I keep getting on even though I'm like Discord illiterate. And just seeing what people are painting and people playing and what questions people are asking and finding out the answers they're getting and people posting up model previews. Like it's the Discord. If people love Discord, that's probably the place to be if you just want to build hype for the game, because all the people that are hyped about the game are right there. Well, a lot of people that are hyped about the game are there.
Yeah, and then so definitely get people involved in Discord because it's an awesome community and there's always a lot of discussion going on in there. And then another thing you can do is like get people involved on the hobby side of things. If you know that your friends enjoy hobby, I know Lewis, does his points a day challenge every month, so you can get people involved on that. Do the hobby hangouts like Josh was saying. Get people involved online. Then you can also just do fun stuff where you just talk about get together and just talk about what your builds would be, or what you think the jack loadouts would be, or how you would want to convert your models or paint them, or just engage with people in whatever aspect of the game. Yeah, show them videos to YouTube. Hop on one of our streams whenever we get back to streaming.
Have listen to podcasts. Wink, wink.
The most important thing, though, that I just want to reiterate is however you do it, wherever you do it, please just do it safely, guys. By no means do we want to encourage people to go out there and force engagements with everything going on in the world right now. So,
right.
And by the way, if you're playing with somebody that you're trying to get interested in the game, like, don't feel like you need to own two factions. Like, proxy some things out. Let them experience the game. Let them see if they're interested in it. And don't care if you have the right models.
Yeah.
I was using Toros for my Morning Stars for a little bit. So
War Machine makes great proxies.
Right. I mean, just try and have fun, experience the rules, see if the rules are for you or the other person you're trying to get interested in the game. Because I find a lot of the times when people are trying to get somebody else interested in the game, it's because they're the only ones in their community that's interested in it. So they're trying to get at least somebody else that they could play against. So
yeah, definitely.
Just try and maybe both of you just proxy stuff. Hey, we both have these big War Machine armies. Use yours as ISA. I'm going to use mine as Marcher Worlds. We all know what our proxies are supposed to be. It's not a huge miniature line yet. It isn't like there are 50 things that anything could be. There's like each faction has at most 3 squads. Each faction has at most like 4 solos. 4 characters. It's like there's not a huge variety yet, and which is a good thing for proxying things out, so it makes it a little less confusing. So proxy things out, play the game, experience what the game is. Because honestly, for me, one of the weirdest things was seeing what a 30 by 30 map was. Because it's small. It is. I'm used to that 48 by 48, and just the sheer amount of drop down to 30 by 30 when you see it in real life is a little jarring, honestly.
Yeah, and then like talking about 30 by 30, I know you mentioned if you have somebody that you trust and feel comfortable like going over to their house, like you don't need a crazy setup. You need a kitchen table to play a skirmish game. So that definitely opens the barrier for entry a lot.
Okay, our next question comes from, and again, I apologize if I say your name wrong, Luis Nin from Charge and Spike. And
well,
before
he's got
I
like machine gun questions here.
Yeah, the next
all the rest of the questions.
The rest of the questions are all from him.
And thank you very much for posting so many questions. We super appreciate you.
100%. And before I actually read out his questions, I just want to send Luis a personal thank you. My wife's best friend got a commissioned digital painting back a few days before Christmas, and it was not up to what she expected, and the website refused to do anything about it or refund her. I put a call out on Facebook just seeing if any of my friends had any Photoshop experience, and Luis went above and beyond to fix the painting for her, and it made her mother cry. It was a commissioned painting of the family's kids. There was 2 families with 4 kids, and their great-grandparents. And he edited everything. He went through the clothing, said he didn't have time to do the faces, went back later that night, and still made time to do the faces to make this lady's Christmas. So he is an amazing gentleman, and I just wanted to take a minute to thank him on air for that.
He's a great dude. I know that every group I've seen him in, War Machine, he's in so many groups, and I don't know how he puts so much attention to everything that he does, because he's doing stuff all the time. He's got his Advent painting calendar going on. He's got so much going on, and he's just such an asset to every group that he's in.
He is the perfect example of what you want a pillar of your community to be.
He is one of the community all-stars.
Yep.
So his first question is, do you see room for scenarios that are more than area control in competitive play?
When he first posted this question, I responded to him and I was like, I have no idea what that would even look like. And it's been at least 2 weeks, and I still have no idea what that would look like. So for you guys that have a little bit more experience with wargaming in general, I'm really interested to see what your takes are on this.
So my immediate reaction to that is kind of like what I said in the multiplayer game. You could play like 3 pulse rounds and just go off of who's killing what. Or I guess like even my like segmented board idea still comes down to area control.
Mm-hmm.
So I
only-
mean, what were you gonna say? Sorry.
I was gonna say the only thing I can think of is, there's the portable objectives in the game, so I guess you could do like a whole scenario of just like portable objectives and kind of capture the flaggy like you were talking about, or hot potato, or drop off the bomb type thing. But that's really the only thing I can think of personally.
Well, I mean, Josh was saying the kill points. You're saying like the capture the flag or Blood Bowl kind of situation. I know that Kill Team has a couple scenarios, well, at least one scenario where you're just trying to get models off the board. Instead of actually trying to score anything that's on the board, you're trying to see how many things you can get off the board, and you get, so much of a victory based off of how many things you can get off the board, which I think might be interesting if certain models and armies didn't exist in Warcaster, right? Like,
Yeah.
and the mechanics of summoning didn't exist, right?
Yeah.
Because once you get across the board or into a part where, hey, my Weaver can't be seen, it's on a small base, so good luck trying to get to it, and I just keep putting a gate over here and summoning from it, and if you don't kill all the stuff that I put out there, which is like 4 Marauders and Raxus, well, something's getting off the board. Or a Nemesis that goes 18 inches and says, see you later, bye.
Mhm. I mean, race mode is basically that. So, there's options. I don't think in competitive or with our current way that the game is set up, but there's definitely options for alternative play styles for sure.
There's also different game modes that, like, War Machine has come out with, like Extreme Robot Wrestling, and they've had like, what was it? They had some kind of caster draft mode where you would just have like, you had all the casters and you would get one, and that would be like something you played with. It's like a King of the Hill mode or something, like an arena where you chose like one thing to be your champion. I'm not sure how well those like translate to Warcaster, but I'm kind of curious to see how they're going to play with the game. And I think he specifically mentioned for competitive play.
Yes.
And I think, unfortunately, it's very hard to say that besides the killing thing or a capture the flag sort of thing, I don't think that many of those other zany, crazy ideas can make it into competitive play, because competitive play scenarios kind of have to be well balanced. And
I did just think of one.
Oh, go ahead, Josh.
It's not based on scenarios so much, but if you wanted to spice up competitive play a little bit, you could have like a either like a draft system or ban system with cipher decks, where like you either both draft from a set of cipher cards, or each player gets like 2 or 3 bans, and you can just say like that cipher card can't be used this game kind of deal.
Well, that's interesting, and I like those ideas. But his question says, talking particularly about scenario,
Yeah,
that is
yeah.
about area control. So I think that's an interesting idea in list selection and list creation. I think what he's talking about is more like, instead of saying, okay, well, this is how many CPs I got in the game, I guess I win, or getting CPs from something other than controlling points. So like
Fair enough.
It's like a secondary being turned into the entire point of the mission.
It just popped into my head, so I had to get it out.
Having objectives that appear in places, but you have to destroy them rather than actually hold them.
Yeah.
Might be an idea. I don't know if I like that because I think some armies are much more equipped for that than others.
Oh, definitely.
But these are all things that Privateer Press can consider and use in the future. And we may see some of them, we may see none of them. Maybe they've got some really great minds. Like I would have never thought of Warcaster in the way it plays in a million years. So I trust what they're putting out, and I'm curious to see where it'll go. And I really do hope we do have some other scenarios that aren't just like, there are 4 objectives now, and they're in this weird pattern, and now you have to hold these. I'm sure they will experiment a little bit with that. I think we'll see a lot of those experimentations in
The narrative.
narrative in the campaign mode. It's like even that last scenario in First Contact where you aren't necessarily worried about holding those points for extended periods of time. You just need to put your token on it, and then you're not really worried about it for the rest of the pulse round.
Mm-hmm.
You're kind of trying to keep people off of it, which I guess is zone control. But like interacting with scenarios and objectives in different ways, I think is interesting and cool, and I'm looking forward to some of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's definitely options out there. It'd just take a whole lot of brainstorming to get there. So
Right.
His next question is, when would you like the next Kickstarter to launch? I will lead with this one by saying, hopefully late summer to give my poor wallet some time to recoup.
Yeah, my answer is I would like it to start as soon as I have enough money saved up to back it.
My answer is I expect it in June. I'm not going to be upset if it's not in June, but I expect it in June, and I want it whenever they've got the assets ready enough to where they can deliver in a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah, that's true. And also once they've got the models at a balanced state, right?
Right.
So, once their development is done and I have the money to afford it, is when I want the Kickstarter to start.
When it's ready, and I can purchase it.
Yeah, because to be honest, it went the Kickstarter one for Warcaster, pledged it, and then that ended, and a month or 2 months later, they hit us with Wintertime Wasteland, and of course I pledged it because I love Riot Quest. And then I think they gave us another month or 2 break and hit us with Warcaster 2.
Was it even it was more than a month. That's right.
Yeah. There was a decent gap in there. And then Warcaster 2's just ending. And then they're hitting us with the IKRPG in January, which I have to back.
If I could find people to do a campaign with me, I would 100% get those.
Oh, we're doing one online, guys. It's happening.
Roll20, yes.
Yeah. No, I've already started learning how to use their facilities for DMing and whatnot. So I'm going to write already have part of a campaign written that we are going to stream.
Oh my God. If you're one to be the game master, then I am 100% on board.
Yeah, I'm going to let you two play. I'm going to reach out to Red, see if he wants in, and maybe another personality or two from within the community, and just have a inner podcaster kind of.
Yeah, I know Red is really involved in the RPG community, so hopefully he gets in, because I would love to play with Red.
Perfect.
And a couple other people, in the community would be cool too.
Cool.
We'll figure it out. Okay, and he said his next question. Let's say there was a card website similar to War Machine Hordes. Would you be on board with buffing underperforming models, i.e. witch hunters?
I mean, I think that's important to make every model feel relevant, especially this early in the game. Like to have models that people are like, well, this model's just bad, is a little rough. So I think it's fine to at this point in the game to buff underperforming models. But I think one thing people need to understand is that Privateer Press is a model company, and so they need to have like if they make all the models equally good, then and they put out something new that isn't necessarily any better than anything that's already out. There's no reason to buy that model, right? And I mean, we see this with Games Workshop all the time. Like new editions have like, well, your whole Space Marine army you had in 8th edition, you need to buy all new Space Marines because you don't have Eradicators, Outriders, or any of these other crazy new things that they put out. So like, I think a lot of people get upset when like with War Machine. I know a lot of people have been upset that certain models have been under the bar for a long time, and that the new stuff is quote always better than what's already out. But that's part of miniatures companies. They have to make things that are good.
That's part of any game design. Power creep is an inherent part of game design that without it, games would die. And then another thing that people have to take into account is that not everything has to be competitive.
Right.
You can play those witch hunters because you like the model and you want to play it in a casual game.
Yeah, and everything has. It's also not necessarily about like how powerful something is. I mean, Privateer Press doesn't necessarily need to release things that are more powerful. They just need to release things that are different and give you options. Right. Which is, this specific model or unit that we're talking about, the Witch Hunters, that's its place. It's a utility piece, so it's an option to take if you want to, because it does give you some certain utility. And if you don't want to take it, you don't have to take it. So you're not like forced to buy it. But as far as the question itself, I am 100% down with errata and continuous development as long as there is a centralized place to get your information. So I would personally
100% agreed.
I would personally love an app, but even if it's a web app would be fine because then you can just save that onto your phone as an app anyways, which would be perfect. But just something better than whatever they have for War Machine and Hordes, because that thing is terrible.
I love that app.
You watch your mouth. I love War Room.
Oh no, not the app. The
the card database.
Yeah, the card database is a trick.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I retract my statement.
not War Room.
We're
Me and Justin, we're gonna fight you.
Fisticuffs over here.
That's why I was so. Like, if War Machine University didn't exist, I wouldn't have gotten into Brawl Machine ever, right? But they do such a good job of compiling everything together that it made it a lot easier. So as long as there's something at least to that level, then 100%.
The amount of hours I've put into War Room is disgusting.
Right, and especially when I was learning the game. Oh my god.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that updating models is good for the game. Like, they're doing it with War Machine, where they have the dynamic updates coming out. And I think a lot of people there are frustrated that they're not coming out fast enough or for enough models. And to that, I say that's going to happen. I think if they update all the things all the time, then it creates a lot of confusion in a community. And especially with War Machine, where it's such a big game. Like Storm Knights. Storm Knights are getting a dynamic update. They've confirmed that.
I can't wait.
Pardon?
I said I can't wait. That's like the one thing I'm waiting on.
And then, if they release that update and then they release another dynamic update and they release another one all in like 3 months, like I think Games Workshop is guilty of this all the time, where they fact too often, where suddenly like nobody knows what these models do. They might have just changed them 3 times in those 3 months, and now nobody's sure what they do, and it creates a lot of confusion in the community. So I hope that they do update models at certain points when it makes sense to, but I hope they do it when it's needed. Like Witch Hunters, as the example, they have it's very niche and it's a little frustrating, but they do have their use. One model like a month ago or before the Kickstarter 2, I would have said needs a rehaul is the Grafter, right? The Grafter has such a weird tabletop presence that I was like, well, never see a reason to put this. I love the model. I never see this reason to put this really cool model on the table because it's just not functional. Well, the Scythes came out. Well, now his repair mechanic is useful. It really didn't feel good putting it on a Marauder because, well, Marauder's 1 point to resummon. Like, I could care less if it dies. But the Scythe takes 3 to resummon, and it needs to hurt itself to do its ability. So there's a world where you end him close to a Grafter, and the Grafter goes over and heals him, or heals him before he starts his activation. Or, they also added the Raker to AC. So now his ability, your squads don't just immediately evaporate anytime something shoots at them. So now his bring back models abilities feels a lot more relevant. So I hope they go that direction where they make models more relevant through other models.
Yeah, that Kamikaze cipher made the Grafter just get so much more valuable.
There are so many things that made the Grafter a model I felt was trash tier. I would never put in a list. I didn't like him. To a model where I'm like, ooh, this is spicy. This is interesting. And now I don't know if I'm ever putting 2 in a list because he's pretty much pure support. Like, he has no other function.
Right.
He has a very crap melee attack. He's probably the worst melee in the game and doesn't have a gun. Like, he is pure support.
And he's not particularly tanky.
Right. So he's a model that is now a consideration and I would say he's more a consideration in 11.2 and the full-size games. But he didn't get a buff. He didn't change at all. The new releases, the things that are good that they're enticing you to buy, make him more relevant. And I'm kind of hoping they go that route. It's like even the Witch Hunters, there's a lot more stays in play ciphers now. Mm-hmm. And so their ability is more useful. Now, I don't think that helps them in all the cases because one of those stays in play ciphers is the one for the Marcher World squads where they get +2 defense. Well, they're probably not hitting that squad now. So their buff, their ability becomes like, it could have been amazing, but it's probably not going to work. You're just going to get yourself frustrated if you're trying to remove that particular cipher.
So that brings up a good point, kind of as like a final thought to this, that Warcaster is still in its infancy. It's too early to be erratating and making tweaks to models right now, because look at some of the changes that have happened just from Kickstarter 1 to 2. They're still filling out factions and faction identities. So as new models come out to complement the faction, some of those models that don't seem relevant right now may find a place with new stuff coming out. So just kind of keep in mind that it feels like Warcaster's been out a long time, but this is literally just the beginning for the game.
Well, and if you think about it, the Kickstarter 1 stuff didn't even finish releasing to retail until the end of November. So we're talking about the game from Kickstarter 1 has been fully released out in the wild, technically, only for like a month.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind. I think maybe, if we're thinking about, a year after the Kickstarter 2 stuff comes out, might be the first time I really want them to really make solid changes to models that are already out.
Agreed.
Yeah.
All right. So next question is, this was pretty much directed directly at Spencer. After running your TTS league, what advice would you have for the organized play lead, Faye, on tournament packets?
I'll break this actually into 2 parts, one for Faye and then one for, event organizers in general. So for Faye, I mean, the pendulum packet we've already done an entire rundown on that, so my understanding on my thoughts on that. After looking over the data with this first league, and I'll continue looking over through leagues going forward, is not just second turn advantage, but turn advantage needs to be fixed. That's pretty much the only feedback I have, though, is for Faye as far as league. And events and things of that nature, beyond what we already talked about in our pendulum packet, is the turn advantage was very, very obvious across the tournament. And I think that is the single largest issue when it comes to this game from a competitive standpoint, which I know isn't their huge focus, but it's definitely something that I think needs to be fixed, because the first roll of the game shouldn't be determining so much of the outcome. Now, and that depends on the scenario specifically. End of pulse round, the second turn player is advantaged, end of activation, first turn player is advantaged. So that's the big thing. Now, as far as for event organizers, I say you need to have a very, very clear tournament packet. And what I mean by that is there's a variety of rulings that you can have, and especially with them saying that the pendulum packet is basically yours to do what you want with. And there's a couple of different rules in general that you have to make rulings on, such as how are you treating your objectives that count as terrain? Are they tokens that you can stand on, and then anything that is touching that token gets cover from everything? Are they obstacles that you can move over, but you can't end on? Are they obstructions that you can't even move over? So you have to make a ruling on that. You have to make a ruling on how you're treating verticality. So whether there's overhang or not, and how you're going to handle that in terms of how much overhang is available, what you're going to do if a model gets slammed while it's on top of terrain. So you have to make a couple of decisions regarding that. And you just need to make sure that all of your players are aware of the decision that you've made, preferably why you made them as well. I mean, I like knowing the whys behind the whats. And then just making sure that everybody is on the same page, as well as labeling your terrain and what terrain counts as, and how it works, which in Warcaster is pretty easy because there's like 3 types of terrain and they're pretty much pre-labeled, so it shouldn't be an issue most of the time. But just making sure that everybody's clear on exactly what counts as what and how they should be treating things is really important. You don't want to be bombarded with questions all the time. You want your players to have a good experience, so the more they know, then the less potential there is for issues popping up. So just make sure everything's clear and they know what's going on, and that you have reasons for making the choices that you've made. Right.
So his next question we kind of already covered, but if you have a brief summary you want to throw at it, that's cool. He asks, how much terrain is too much terrain?
When there's so much terrain on the board that it makes moving and positioning your models difficult, which is a lot of terrain. So I think I did a count the other day for one of my maps that I did for the tournament for one of my skirmish maps. It had something like 40 pieces of terrain on there between obstructions and obstacles. And there were like 2 rough terrain patches. Or no, on that map there was a couple of rough terrain patches. So I mean, you can have a lot of stuff on your board. Now, obviously, not all 40 of those are like 6 buildings. There's tank traps and barriers and boxes. Other types of scatter was about 20 of them, and then I had just under 20 obstructions, but a few of those were like 2 by 4 inch shipping crate looking things, and only 1 or 2 large buildings. So you can put a lot of terrain on the board, but as long as there's not so much that it impacts the way that things can move in a negative way, you're fine.
Well, and that becomes harder and harder as they release bigger base sizes, because the vehicle bases, sometimes it's very hard to find a landing spot for your vehicle. It can be a challenge to make these areas that have spots where vehicles can land, because now your buildings, when we just had heavies, needed to be like 2 inches apart, and you had an avenue where a heavy could walk through.
Yeah.
But now if you want to be able to have spots where your vehicles can land in that same area, they need to be 3 inches apart. So I think one big thing is, you have too much terrain if you make it hard for things to interact with scenario points, especially. Your
Yeah.
scenario points need to be interactable by many models, including vehicles. So which adds like a weird dynamic to it, where you need at least probably 2 landing points near each scenario point that a vehicle could potentially land. So I would say, you don't want to have just one point where a vehicle can sneak in there. Then it's almost too easy to block off certain models from getting in there, and like half the game is interacting with these scenario points. So if you make maps that are bad, that feel bad for your players to have certain models in their list, like there are boards where it's good to have, where it's like, well, I might not want to bring both of my sites, but it's good to have boards where I feel like I can play them.
Yeah, for sure. No, always getting to use your models is super important.
Yeah, I also think taking a huge vehicle is also a choice. So I don't like. I want to make sure that there's places for it to land and it can interact with things, especially scenario. But at the same time, like, I'm not trying to make sure everything is super spread out so there's lanes for vehicles everywhere, because then it just gets too spread out. If you're taking a giant vehicle, I mean, that's kind of a choice, and so you understand that there's positioning it is going to be more difficult than positioning other things, right? So, especially around objectives, though, if you look at my maps, they're very open, because the objectives themselves, more often than not, provide cover. And so my goal from there is just to try to get it to where, some things are based around it, where like a warjack could get cover, right? So it just needs to be 3 inches away from the edge of the objective, which gives you enough room for a vehicle to land, right?
Yeah.
Definitely don't be crowding your objective with like boxes and stuff like right on top of the objective. That's not a good idea. But that's more about placement rather than amount of terrain, right?
So, Louis wants to know, do you guys see full battle force becoming more popular when in-person games become more common?
Absolutely.
I think that's an interesting question, because if you look at the groups, like just amongst us podcasters, right? Red Wolf and Encrypted Command, well, Hyper News Network and Encrypted Command, they both have groups where they can play in person. And you notice those are the 2 podcasts where they play pretty much all full size. So I think that once we're in person and we get our hands on full size, I think the game is better balanced around full size. And I think that once people get to play that, it'll catch. It's just hard to do on Tabletop Simulator. You almost have to do like we'll play today and tomorrow.
Yeah, oh, definitely. It's just like playing a game of War Machine on the tabletop and on War Table. War Table takes twice as long, if not longer.
I think that's list dependent, but I would agree to an extent. I think War Machine, you can kind of plan for 3 hours and being done. I think a full size game of Warcaster on Tabletop Simulator, you kind of have to count on 4 to 5.
One of the other things about playing online is, whether it be a War Table or a Tabletop Simulator, is how accurate your measurements are. And so a lot of times you'll sit there and you'll fiddle with stuff so much, just trying to like get that last little 0.1, right? Or position, stuff perfectly. Whereas you don't really have that option on the tabletop itself, or you have widgets, to make it easier sometimes. But
hey, I'm going to say for War Table, playing Crucible Guard is borderline easier on there than in real life. Because positioning a spray perfectly in real life, or doing scatters in real life, is such an imperfect and awkward experience. People makes those 2 things so easy that I'm like, Crucible Guard might be the one exception where you are playing faster on War Table than you do in real life.
Yeah. Agreed. But yeah, no, I definitely see them becoming more common. Tabletop just facilitates a faster game, and it'll be a fun afternoon out with, your play group or whatever. So
Yeah, and FBF is so different from skirmish.
So different, and it feels, in my few experiences with the game, like the game was more meant for full size.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think when you play that after playing skirmish, you'll be like, "Wow, this is kind of nice." Like I'm having like really relevant choices, and I'm not losing a lot of models before I ever activate them.
Yeah, and you don't appreciate the differences until you actually play until you get a couple of games with both of them, right? Because it's very different.
definitely, especially like I played one when I first started playing, and then just played the one for the finals in the league. Well, two for the last two games of the league, and it is like night and day. I didn't build my list optimally for full battle force. It's a whole new beast.
Mm-hmm.
So let's cap it off with Luis wants to know, how would you like to see the keepers integrated into the game?
Yeah, so that gets interesting.
Lore on the keepers, because I don't think a lot of people are super familiar with them.
Yeah,
Do either of you guys know the lore on the keepers?
I've got my rule book right here. I'll just read their little thing. So while I get into this, while I find it, I'll talk. And so the keepers are listed in the faction section of the book. And so far, everything listed in the faction section of the book has been its own faction. So I expect the keepers to be their own faction, but just the way that their lore works makes it sound like they might not be. So I'll talk a little bit about my thoughts on that once I've read this. So here's what it says about the keepers on page 17 of the rulebook. So, remnants of the original migration that first brought humans to the galaxy, the Keepers are ancient souls preserved in vessels not unlike those of the Empyreans. But the Keepers hail from humanity's birthplace, and they had transferred their essence into their mechanical bodies of antiquated clockwork and simple electrical motors long before their first contact with the architects. Few remain, and those who do stay carefully hidden. For they alone possess the secrets of Mechanika and the ciphers that the technology can conjure. Those who possess the spark of a warcaster are impotent to unlock their powers without the instruction of a keeper, and so the keepers are marked for death. If the Empyreans can eliminate these shepherds of arcane knowledge from the ranks of humanity, then the warcasters who defend their kind will, in time, become extinct. The keepers are humanity's only remaining link to its origins, but they're reluctant to share their knowledge of the past. It is fraught with conflict and tainted with sins they hope to hide from mankind, lest we give in to temptation and invite the same wrath that sent us fleeing to the stars in the first place. There are many legends of the Keepers and those who rescued humanity from oblivion, but there is one among them, known only as the Prime, who is said to possess the greatest depth of arcane knowledge as well as the power to wield it. The legends say that the Prime was the instrument of salvation in humanity's darkest moment, and it was his power that undid the architects before they nearly ended our existence altogether. Whether the Prime exists or is simply a fantastic figure of mythology, he is still sought by the forces of the Empyreans and humanity alike. For his legacy is humanity's survival and its ongoing conquest of 1,000 worlds.
Okay, so based off that very epic dialogue, excellent job reading it, by the way.
Tingles.
I would say it doesn't sound like they're going to be their own faction. If they're that rare and like to stay hidden, it doesn't seem likely. But from a narrative standpoint, it does give an opportunity for like a grand moment where they reemerge
Right.
as their own civilization.
Yeah, here's my thought process on that is like, so the Empyreans have been, in stasis for, 1,000 years or however long it's been, right? And so then now the Empyreans are coming back. So then I think, they just had the narrative event of like, first contact with the Empyreans. So I think the next like narrative event is going to be like Rise of the Keepers or something, going all Star Warsy. And so it's either going to be a sub faction of the Keepers that have decided to come out of hiding and actually take part in the war, or like a renegade faction, because they're going to be fighting against other humans, right? So I think that's the weird part of them being their own faction. Um, so I don't know. I think it would be cool. I think it would be cool for them to be their own faction. We've seen a picture of them. They're basically like a little spider robot dude, which was neat. Um, so I don't know. Or they're just going to be some kind of add-on to the human factions in some way, shape, or form. Because obviously the Imperians aren't getting access to them.
Well, maybe Imperium's captured one and is using it instead of just flat out killing it too. So
I also think it's worth noting that in the Oblivion campaign, we've seen that Nemo gets a mechanical body, and they talk about the Prime in that blurb. And Nemo, when he gets his mechanical body, is known as Artificer Prime Nemo.
right, that's
100.
obviously Nemo. So the faction is basically going to be Convergence.
Yeah, they're 100% convergence. That's
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
is really clear.
That's
It
pretty
will.
straightforward. I kind of expect them to. I don't know if I expect them to kind of do a wild card thing like they did with the Empyrean Heroes solos, where each faction can have the influence of a keeper, and or if I expect keepers to kind of be something like almost like theme forces. You could say that your faction is being influenced by a certain keeper and get this set of rules and changes to your faction. Because they're the ones that teach your whole faction how to manipulate art, right? So this Aeternus cult maybe was influenced by a keeper that valued stealth more. So maybe your things that need to be charged for stealth get it all the time, but your other models you can't choose Marauders because Marauders are not stealthy.
I will say my one hope for the Keepers is that we get a few more ties to War Machine and the people that went through the gate in Oblivion.
Well,
Yeah.
it sounds like Keepers are callbacks the faction.
Yeah.
We've also so the image that they created when they released or revealed Sec was them excavating a Axiom Prime, right? That's the right thing, right?
The Prime Axiom, it's a Convergence Colossal, yeah.
Yeah, and then the Empyreans were, they were fighting the Empyreans while they were excavating it and stuff, and so that was pretty cool. So I mean, we're definitely going to be seeing some War Machine lore come in with the Keepers, which I think people are super excited about. Because right now, the only lore that we have is the Keepers, and that they exist, and that they're Convergence, or they're alluded to be Convergence, and that Fang is a daughter of Cain or one of the other.
Who's Fang a daughter of? You cut out there.
He's a descendant of Cain.
Yeah, well, either Cain or was it Ryan, right?
I think she said she had blood of the whatever he got called when he turned into a pistol wraith.
Hellslinger.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's cool.
Yeah, someone was saying that one of the other ones are also Hellslingers or whatever. Basically, like Cain 3, like that whole cadre, right? I don't know, but people were talking about it on the Discord. I don't know much about War Machine lore, but yeah, the idea is she's the daughter of Cain, and that's really the only throwbacks that we have. I mean, there's been some stuff like alluded to with AC.
The Karchev armor.
Yeah, and then basically
The temples like they've kind of loosely alluded to Gatsby being part of AC.
Yeah, or was it Gatsby or someone else? Basically, the Archlich is expected to be a Crix person,
right?
And so there's definitely some interesting stuff, and I'm assuming this lore book and the lore blurbs we're going to be getting over the next 6 months is going to be opening up some of that information, which I'm super excited about. So
if it's anywhere close to being on par with the Henchhold Scrolls, oh, I'm so excited.
Well, they've actually said they're going to finish off the Henchhold Scrolls this year, so I'm excited for that.
So, oh yeah, give me lore. The more, the better. Like I've never refreshed Twitter so much in my life, waiting for those scrolls.
And weirdly enough, the conclusion of the Hingehold Scrolls is kind of Warcaster lore. So
It 100% ties into Warcaster. So
Yeah,
yeah,
100.
so I'll be very curious to see how those end and kind of what kind of Easter eggs they give us in there.
Mhm.
You know, even if they extend to, you know, people's first days on the other side of the gate.
Plus, there's other like interesting things, like in the runes in the book, it references Gubbin, and then somewhere else there's something about like the immortal, which we're expecting to be Gubbin, ironically. So there's
I hope not. What a lame character to make immortal.
there's just like I don't know. There's a lot of potential there. I
I'm
know.
super stoked if they made a Gobber faction in Warcaster. Like, you know, a bunch of Gobbers ended up going through the gate and then just kind of made their own community. I don't know why. I love those little zany factions.
I think it would like kind of ruin the feel.
Yeah, what I want to see is Warcaster get integrated into Riot Quest or have their own version of Riot Quest in the future, which would be really cool.
I mean, it could be its own season. That'd be pretty cool.
Well, you know, I kind of half expect a Haley model to come out that can be work for all three games, because Haley has just the craziest time warping abilities and everything that she could just technically be in Warcaster.
Oh yeah, no, there people have like there's been rumors of and speculation that Haley 3 is going to be tied into Warcaster, and she makes complete sense.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's a lot of people that want Warcaster to just stand on its own and be its own game. So I don't know how people are gonna like if that is the case, how they would respond to that. But I think from a lore perspective, I mean, having the throwbacks to War Machine is cool, and people
No,
are
I
definitely.
love Easter eggs. Easter eggs are like one of my favorite things. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah. Like it can be its own game 100%. But like you can't get rid of like the origins of the game, which is people fleeing through the gate. Like there's gonna be a connection no matter what.
Yeah. Also, we're 100% getting an Infernal faction at some point in
Oh,
Warcraft. Like, there's zero doubt about that. That is happening.
and I'm wondering if they'll be the you know, treated as like the Tyranid or Zerg equivalent faction.
I mean, they,
Because I am 100% buying into whatever faction that is. Give it to me. I want it.
yeah. I mean, I'm not a huge like. I like the way the Tyranids look and stuff, but like, I'm not huge on them. But I'm not gonna lie, the new Savage Swarm Monpok stuff has me really tempted to get into Monpok. Because that big bee thing and then the Hercules beetle that's already released, like, they look so cool. It looks so cool.
Well, maybe we need to stream some Monpok then on our Twitch.
Maybe try it out. See if it's worth picking up.
All right, guys. On that note, we've ran pretty long, so let's wrap it up with some final thoughts. I'll start with Justin.
Listen, I'm excited for where the game is going. I'm excited for where it's at. I'm super excited for the Pendulum tournament in January that's going to start. I'm just super excited for a lot of what's going on. I just want to thank everybody who listens to us and everybody who submitted questions. You know, if we were just talking to ourselves here, I mean, we could do that without posting it. So I'm happy for anybody that listens, and I'm excited to bring more content for people.
What about you, Spencer?
Yeah, I completely agree. I just thank everybody for listening and then for submitting the questions that they did. And when we do this again in the future, definitely reach out. And then if you guys have any ideas for casts that y'all want to see, then give us a holler. We're happy to produce content. That's what we're here for, is for y'all. And then definitely next time we do a Q&A, ask us some more interesting questions, because we talk about Warcaster all the time, so it's cool to talk about pineapples on pizza, because it's the way to go.
Always pineapple on pizza. But yeah, I just want to echo the thoughts of the other two and just say it's been a great 9 episodes. We love doing this for you guys. You've been a great audience, and the feedback we've got and the amount of people that are listening just blow us away. So thank you, everybody, for that. I hope everyone's staying safe out there. I hope everyone had a good holiday season, and we will be back next week with another episode. So we will talk to you guys next time.
Toodles.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. This podcast is brought to you by Essex Wargames. Now, if y'all enjoyed the content, don't forget to subscribe. Now, for more content, you can check out the Through the Void Gate blog, or join us on the Essex Wargames Facebook, Discord, and YouTube. Stay safe and roll super strikes.